They walked into the boardroom laughing. Rich suits, designer clothes, champagne flutes, a luxury building, expensive art on the walls, a week's salary in every seat cushion. And then she stepped in. Her uniform didn't match the room. Her shoes weren't polished. Her name badge said, Amina, cleaning staff. The CEO's wife smiled. But behind that smile was a joke. A cruel one. She had invited Amina as a prank, to mock her in front of powerful executives and socialites. But what happened next? No one could have ever predicted. Because when Amina stood before that room, something inside every elite person shifted. And the truth they discovered left them all stunned. Stay with me because this story will change how you think about power, dignity, and courage. Victoria Langford had everything she could dream of. The kind of wealth others admire and envy. She lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, drove a car many couldn't name, wore dresses that cost more than most people's rent. And her husband, Maxwell Langford? He was a self-made billionaire, CEO of Langford Industries. Fortunes built on tech, real estate, and deals others only hear about on financial news. Victoria wasn't just rich. She was used to attention, used to supremacy, used to the spotlight. But she was also bored. Rich people get bored easily. When you have everything, the next thrill is feeling superior. One afternoon, Victoria got an idea. Her friends were hosting a high-profile corporate luncheon. VIPs from around the world. Investors, celebrities, columnists, a chance to show off. Victoria said with a laugh, "Let's invite someone unexpected." Her friends giggled. "Who? Like what?" Victoria smirked. "I know just the one." She thought of the cleaning lady who worked at one of the Langford office buildings. Amina. Not an executive. Not a model. Not someone from their social circles. Just a woman whose job was to clean floors. Victoria didn't even know her name. She called it a prank. A harmless joke. Invite her to the luncheon without telling her why. Imagine the look on her face when she realizes she's among billionaires. Her friends laughed. Brutal. But hilarious. The plan was set. Amina walked into the Langford office building every morning at 6:15 a.m. She wasn't glamorous. She didn't have a fancy resume. Her uniform was light blue, slightly faded from wash after wash. Her shoes were worn, a little creased on the sides. But she had something many of the guests would never understand. A heart full of dignity. Every mark on her uniform told a story of hard work. Every crease in her shoes was proof of miles walked. Not because she wanted to, but because she had to. She raised 2 kids on her own. Her husband had passed years earlier. She worked these jobs to keep food on the table and dreams alive. Her dream wasn't fame. It wasn't wealth. It was simple. To give her children a life she never had. One morning when Amina arrived at work, her supervisor handed her a card. "Special invitation," she said. "A banquet luncheon. Hosts, Mr. and Mrs. Langford." "Just attend," the supervisor said. "You don't have to do anything." Amina blinked. Her heart raced. Why her? She didn't ask. She smiled politely and tucked the invitation into her apron pocket. She didn't know what she had just agreed to. The Langford Tower, 52 floors of glass, steel, and luxury. Amina stood at the entrance, clutching the invitation. Her heart was pounding. She had never been inside a place like this. She stepped in, and the doors closed behind her with a sound that felt heavier than metal. Inside, guests mingled, dressed in couture, heels that clicked like they owned the world, and watches that cost more than Amina's yearly rent. No one paid her any attention. Until she walked into the main hall. Silence. Not loud silence. That kind of silence that meant people were staring. Victoria spotted her immediately. A slow smile spread across her face. "This will be perfect," Victoria whispered. The room buzzed. Champagne. Small talk. Compliments exchanged like currency. Victoria approached Amina with exaggerated sweetness. "Welcome," she said loudly. "We're so glad you're here." Amina blinked, confused. "Thank you," she replied softly. "Isn't she adorable?" Victoria said louder this time to the room. Laughter. Tiny, polite chuckles. "Looks like she wandered in from somewhere else." Another laugh. Amina forced a smile. Her eyes didn't match it. Victoria didn't stop. She called in one of the waiters. "Make sure she gets the cheapest seat," Victoria joked. More laughter. Amina's face tightened. She didn't know why everyone was laughing. But she felt it. The weight of uncomfortable eyes. As the luncheon went on, a young executive spilled his drink near Amina's seat. Gasp. Victoria whispered loudly. "Oops." Maybe she did it on purpose. Laughter rippled again. But something shifted. A quiet man in the back stood up. He was different. Older. Calm. Not impressed. He walked toward Amina. The room didn't know who he was. But everyone watched as he stood beside her. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said. Curious murmurs. Then he looked at Amina. "To the woman who works harder before sunrise than most of us do in an entire week," he said. Silence. Then applause. Not mocking. Genuine. Victoria's smile faltered. The man was Maxwell Langford, the CEO himself. He stepped up to the podium. The room shifted. All eyes on him. "What if," Maxwell said calmly, "we judged worth by effort instead of appearances?" He paused. "Hard work is not defined by a title. It's defined by sacrifice." Everyone in the room realized something was wrong. And then Maxwell said, "Amina was invited here because of her work ethic. Not as a joke." Gasp. "What?" Victoria turned red. "Wait, what?" Maxwell held up the invitation card. "You see," he continued, looking directly at Victoria, "when I decided to host this luncheon, I wanted an example of real dedication. Someone who embodies resilience." Amina stood frozen. She had no idea what was happening. But the room began to applaud. Not politely. Not sarcastically. Appreciatively. Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Shame. Maybe for the first time in her life. She stood there, looking at Amina, and realized she had mistaken someone's uniform for their worth. Everyone had been ready to laugh. But the CEO, her husband, wasn't laughing. He was teaching. A lesson no boardroom could ever teach. Tears welled up in Amina's eyes. She wasn't sure why. Was it confusion? Gratitude? Shock? All of it. Maxwell walked down the steps. He stood beside her and said something she never expected. "Amina, thank you for being here. Not as a punchline, but as a reminder of what true strength looks like." The room erupted in genuine applause. This time real respect. Victoria looked down. For the first time she saw Amina. Not the uniform. Not the job title. Just a human being. After the luncheon ended, Maxwell approached Amina privately. He asked her to sit with him. He offered her something life-changing. A chance to attend night school. A scholarship financed by the company. A mentor to help her build a career. Amina was speechless. She didn't know she deserved that kind of opportunity. But Maxwell insisted. "It's not charity," he said. "It's recognition of talent I didn't want to miss." Victoria watched from a distance. Her face was a mix of regret and awe. She had meant the invitation as a joke. A prank. But it became a moment of transformation. She realized something about privilege. About compassion. About worth. She walked up to Amina. "Can I talk to you?" she asked quietly. Amina nodded. Victoria's voice trembled. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not just for the prank, but for judging you before really seeing you." Amina looked at her, confused but open. "Thank you," she said gently. Just 2 words. But they carried centuries of pain and misunderstanding. In the months that followed, Amina began attending night classes. She started learning business administration. Maxwell made sure she had a mentor. Victoria started volunteering with community groups. She didn't become perfect overnight, but she became aware. Amina's life changed. Not because of wealth, but because someone finally saw her value. 1 year later, Maxwell hosted a grand gala. Charity, recognition, empowerment, and the keynote speaker? Amina. She stood on stage, not as a cleaning lady, not as a punchline, but as a woman who conquered judgment. Her speech was simple yet powerful. Work is not defined by title, but by the courage it takes to show up every day, with dignity. The audience stood and clapped. This time for real. Victoria watched with pride. Real pride. Not the fake kind she once wore like jewelry. Amina went on to mentor others. She didn't forget where she came from. And Maxwell and Victoria supported community programs that helped workers pursue education and opportunity, not as charity but as dignity. The world didn't change overnight. But that lunch, that one moment, it changed so many lives. Sometimes the lesson we think we're teaching turns out to be the one we needed to learn. And sometimes the person least expected is the one who shows us what true worth really looks like. This story moved you? Like, subscribe and share with someone who needs to hear it. Because dignity isn't earned.